Okay, so I just signed on to TikTok and I just signed on to Facebook. So I'm going to wait for a few people to come on. I'm going to enjoy my drink. Hi, Robin. I'm going to enjoy my cigar and we'll get started soon. Hmm. So, in case anyone is wondering what tonight's live is about, we're going to be reading a couple of chapters from the Spirit book, Allan Kardec. Um, I chose this book specifically because, well, actually, I chose to read out loud for people for a couple of reasons. I get a lot of questions in my inbox. Hey, everyone, introduce yourself, please, because I don't know who's here and I'm not really good at identifying people. Um, I chose to read out loud because I get a lot of inbox messages from practitioners who mainly the question is that they struggle around meditation and they have a hard time with meditation. And one of the big things that I say for people who struggle with meditation and who struggle with the art of visualization is to read more. If you read more, your imagination expands, you can visualize better, you can meditate easier. And then the second piece to that is that they'll tell me that they'll have things like dyslexia or ADHD or just other mental health issues that causes them to, hi Hannah, that causes them to not be able to focus on a book, not be able to read, um, or just simply learning disabilities. They have a difficult time reading and they want to learn and they want to practice, but reading is off the table for them. So that is why I decided to start doing some more live readings of certain books that I feel are necessary for practitioners who want to embark on a spiritism, a spiritismo, who consider themselves psychic, medium, a channeler, and who want to just sort of expand their gifts and sort of understand the spirit world, the science and the psychology and the uh, metaphysics around the idea of spirits and just sort of take it from there. Hello, Patricia. How you doing? So I'm going to give it another 2 minutes and we're going to start this book. A question that I did want to ask you guys is, did you also want me to read the introduction? The introduction is pretty lengthy. However, it is necessary. And those of you who might have this book at home, I highly suggest that you read the introduction as well. Um, if you do want me to read the introduction, I feel like we should do that on a separate day because that in and of itself will take up a whole live. And I want to make sure that each of these lives are an adequate amount of time and not overly done. So let me know if you want to do that, and I will be more than happy to. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, I missed you too. I hope you're doing well. Yes. So, to the Facebook users who are saying hello to me, make sure you write your name down. You're only showing up as a Facebook user. To the YouTube people who are saying hello, hi. To my TikTok people, hello, Nicole. Hello, John. All right. So, we're going to get started in a minute. You're probably wondering why I have this hood on my head. This is my robe, my bathrobe, and I just got it and I'm loving it because I've never had a bathrobe like in my life and I got it for Christmas and I'm feeling myself in it. So, and it's freaking cold. I'm in New York. It's freaking cold. So this bathrobe is super cozy. Hello, Melvin. Hello, hello, hello. All right, so let's do it. Let's get started. So hopefully you guys brought a notebook, a pen. Hopefully you guys are in a comfortable seated position. You have some tea or hot chocolate or coffee or just something that'll relax you. Um, get yourself in a nice zone. Put some incense on, light some candles. Just get yourself feeling good. Reading does not have to be such a drudging experience. I know for a lot of people, reading is almost like a chore, but it doesn't have to be that way. So just get yourself in a good state and we'll get this started. Okay, so chapter 1 of the Spirit book by Allan Kardec is entitled God. Okay, and there's a little sort of preab before the start, and it's kind of written in sort of conversational slash bullet point kinds of ways, and it's done that way to sort of get the reader invested in the dialogue that he has with his peers in the scientific community. Because let's not forget, Allan Kardec was a scientist as well, and he was a teacher. And when these books came out, he was part of, science communities and, kind of like fraternities and things like that. And they all were very much against him. They were all very much like, you're losing your shit. Like, this is not science. And so he kind of wrote these books in a way where he put himself in the position of the adversary, the one who would bring up all of the tough questions, the one who would doubt, and then he sort of answered himself, if that makes any sense. Okay. So, chapter 1, God. God and the infinite, proofs of the existence of God, and the attributes of divinity and pantheism. So that's pretty much what the subject is going to be about in this. Number 1, what is God? God is the supreme intelligence and the first cause of all things. 2, what is meant by the infinite? That which is neither beginning nor end, the unknown. All which is unknown is infinite. Number 3, could we say that God is the infinite? That would be an incomplete definition. Human speech is too impoverished and deficient to define that which transcends human intelligence. God is infinite in divine perfection, but the infinite itself is an abstract concept. Thus, to say that God is the infinite is to replace the thing itself with one of its attributes. It is to divine something that is unknown by referring to something else that is equally unknown. Did you get that? It's almost like speech isn't enough. Proofs of the existence of God. Number 4. Were may we, which is an interesting way of saying this, where may we find proof for the existence of God? Oh, that's a typo in this book. Where may we find proof for the existence of God? In an axiom you apply to your sciences, there is no effect without a cause. If you would search for the cause of whatever it is, not the work of human beings, then the reason will answer your question. To believe in God, we need only to behold the works of creation. The universe exists, therefore, it must have a cause. To doubt God's existence would be to deny that every effect has a cause, and to believe that something could have resulted from nothingness. Number 5, all human beings have within them the intuitive sentiment of God's existence. What can we conclude from this? That God exists. Otherwise, where would such a sentiment come from if not based on something real? This is an application of the principle that there is no effect without a cause. Number 6, mightn't our inner sentiment about the existence of God be the result of education and the product of acquired ideas? If that were the case, why would members of your primitive cultures have this intuition? If the sentiment of the existence of Supreme Being were only the product of education, It would not be universal. Like all scientific ideas, it would only exist in the minds of those who received such education. Ooh, child, I love that. I love that. It definitely calls out the privilege on that one. Number 7. Could we find the first cause of the formation of things in the innermost properties of matter? Even if you could, what in turn would be the cause of those properties? There must be a first cause. There must always be a first cause. To attribute the first formation of things to the innermost properties of matter would be to mistake the effect for the cause, since such properties are themselves an effect that must have had a prior cause. Number 8. What about the idea that attributes the first formation of all things to an accidental combination of matter, i.e., to chance? Another absurdity. How could anyone with any common sense believe that chance is an intelligent agent? Moreover, what is chance? Nothing. The harmony that governs the forces of the universe reveals certain set combinations and designs, and thus an intelligent power. To attribute the first formation of things to chance would be nonsense, because chance is blind and cannot produce intelligent results. An intelligent chance would no longer be a chance. Number 9. Where may we see in the first cause of supreme intelligence superior to all other intelligences? You have a proverb that says, the workman is known by his work. So, look at the work and you will find the workman. Pride is what creates disbelief. Human pride believes in nothing about above itself, and that is why people think they are so powerful. Poor beings. A mere breath from God could blow them over. We judge the power of an intelligence by its works. Since no human being could create what nature produces, it is obvious that the first cause must be an intelligence superior to the humankind. Whatever may be the marvels accomplished by human intelligence, such intelligence itself must have a cause. The greater the results, the greater the first cause must have been. No matter what name you give it, that intelligence is the first cause of all things. We're still in chapter 1, and now we've moved to the attributes of divinity. Let's do it. Number 10. Can human beings fathom God's innermost nature? No. They lack the aptitude to comprehend it. Number 11. Well, they will they ever be able to fathom the mystery of divinity? When their spirits are no longer eclipsed by matter, and when they have finally purified themselves enough to be able to approach God, then they will see and comprehend God. The inferior nature of their faculties makes it impossible for human beings to fathom God's innermost nature. While humanity is in its infancy, people often confuse God with God's creatures, inputting to God their own imperfections. However, they ponder the nature of things more deeply as their moral sense develops, and thus they acquire a truer, though always incomplete, idea of God that conforms more to reason. Number 12. Even though we cannot fathom God's innermost nature, can we get an idea of some of the divine perfections? Yes, some of them. Human beings comprehend them better as they progressively overcome matter. They can get glimpses of them through thought. That means gets to thinking. Gets to thinking. Number 13. When we state that God is eternal, infinite, immutable, immaterial, one, all powerful, and supremely just and good, don't we have a complete idea of God's attributes? From your own point of view, yes, because you believe that in so stating them, you therefore have named all of them. Nevertheless, you should understand that there are things that transcend the intelligence of the most intelligent person, things your language cannot define because language is limited to your ideas and sensations. Your reason tells you that God must be perfect in those attributes to the nth degree. For if God lacked in any of them, or was not perfect in them to the nth degree, then God would not be superior to everything else, and thus would not be God. In order to be superior to everything else, God must not be subject to any change and must not be imperfect in any way imaginable. God is eternal. If God has a beginning, then God would either have to have sprung from nothing or would have to have created by a being that existed previously. Reasoning in this way, we arrive little by little at the idea of eternity and the infinite. God is immutable. If God were subject to change, then the laws that govern the universe would have no stability. God is immaterial. This means that God's nature differs from everything we call matter. Otherwise, God would not be immutable, but always subject to the transformations of matter. God is one. If there were several gods, then there would be no unity of design or power in the organization of the universe. God is all powerful because God is one. If God were not powerful above all else, it would mean that there was something more powerful, or at least as powerful. It would mean that God might not have created all things, and those that God did not create would had to have been the work of some other God. God is supremely just and good. The providential wisdom in the divine laws is revealed in the smallest of things as well as in the largest. And this wisdom makes it impossible to us to doubt either God's justice or goodness. We're now on to the next part of the chapter called Pantheism, number 14. Is God as distinct, or as some believe, the result of all combined forces and intelligences in the universe? If the latter were the case, God per se would not exist because God would be an effect and not a cause. God cannot both be cause and effect at the same time. You cannot doubt that God exists, and that is the point that matters. Believe me, and don't try to go any further. Do not get lost in a maze from which you will not be able to exit. Try to go further. Trying to go further will not make you any better. Instead, it will probably just add to your pride by leading you to imagine that you understand something when you actually understand nothing at all. Therefore, put all theories aside regarding the matter. You have much more important things to be concerned about, beginning with yourselves. Study your own imperfections in order to get rid of them. That will be far more useful to you than trying to penetrate the impenetrable. Number 15. What should we think of the opinion holding that all the bodies in nature, all the beings, and all the globes in the universe are components of the divinity, and taken all together comprise the divinity itself, i.e., a pantheistic doctrine? Since humans are unable to make themselves God, they would like to at least be a part of God. Ooh, ouch. Number 16. Adherents of this theory claim that it demonstrates some of God's attributes. Since there are infinite numbers of worlds, then God is infinite. Since a void or absolute nothingness is nowhere, then God is everywhere. God being everywhere, because everything is an integral component of God, God infuses all the phenomenon of nature with God intelligence. What can refute this viewpoint? Now remember, these questions are being asked from a metaphysical standpoint, an opponent, a doubter, someone who's trying to question these ideas. And then the responses are Allan Kardec. Reason. Reflect on it carefully, and you will have no difficulty in seeing how absurd it is. The pantheistic doctrine views God as a material being who, even though possessed of supreme intelligence, is nevertheless only a larger version of us. Furthermore, since matter is continuously changing, then God would have no stability and would be subject to all the changes and all the needs of humanity. God would thus lack one of the essential attributes of divinity, which is immutability. The properties of matter cannot be linked to the idea of God without impairing how we think about God. And all the subtleties of sophiatry will never be able to solve the issue of God's innermost nature. We do not know all that God is, but we do know that God cannot fail to be. Pantheism, pantheism contradicts the most essential divine properties by confusing the creator with the creature. It is like regarding an ingenious machine, as being an integral component of the mechanist who invented it. God's intelligence is revealed in God's work, just like an artist is revealed in his or her paintings. But God's work are no more actually God than the painting is the artist who conceived and painted it. We are now on chapter 2. Chapter 2 is the general elements of the universe. And the topics that we'll be covering in chapter 2 are knowledge of the origin of things, spirit and matter, the properties of matter, and universal space. Now, I highly suggest paying close attention to this particular chapter because these are the pieces that are going to inform a lot of what we think about spirits and what spirits are composed of and how we can interact with them as mediums, channels, and psychics. Ooh, that drink is good. Hold on, y'all. Let me get another one. Mm. I don't even know what it is. My husband made it for me. All right, let's do it. Chapter 2, number 17, or question 17. Can humans know the origin of things? No. On Earth, God does not allow everything to be revealed to them. Period, point blank. Number 18. Will they ever be able to grasp the mystery of things now hidden from them? The veil is lifted as they become more and more purified, but in order to understand certain things, they need faculties that they do not have yet. Number 19. Can humans grasp some of the nature's secrets through scientific investigation? Science has been given to them for their advancement in all matters, but they cannot go beyond the limits set by God. The more humans are allowed to grasp such mysteries, the more they should admire the power and the wisdom of the Creator. However, whether through pride or through weakness, their own minds often render them victims of illusion, and they pile theory upon theory. Every day, they see how many errors they have mistaken for truths, and how many truths they have dismissed as errors. These realizations are further blows to their pride. Number 20. Outside the realm of scientific investigation, can humans receive communications of a higher order regarding matters that go beyond the scope of their senses? Yes. If God deems it's useful, God will reveal what science cannot detect. It is through such communications that humans can, to a certain degree, know about their past and their future destiny. Now we are on to spirit and matter. Number 21. Is matter eternal like God? Or was it created at some specific time in the past? Only God knows. Nevertheless, there is something you should realize by using your reasons. God, the very personification of love and charity, has never been inactive. No matter how long ago you might imagine the onset of the divine action to have been, could you possibly conceive of God as ever having been idle for even 1 second? Number 22. Matter is generally defined as that which has extension, that which can impress our senses, that which is impenetrable. Are these definitions correct? From your own point of view, they are correct because you can only talk about matters that are familiar to you. Matter, however, also exists in states that are unfamiliar. For example, it may be so ethereal and subtle that your senses cannot detect it. It is matter nonetheless, even though you do not perceive it as such. Then how do we define matter? Matter is the tie that enchains the spirit. It is the instrument that spirit uses and upon which it simultaneously exerts its action. From this viewpoint, one could say that matter is the agent or the intermediary through and upon which spirits act. Number 23. What is spirit? The intelligent principle of the universe. Period, point blank. Okay, well, what is spirit's innermost nature? It's not easy to explain spirit in your language. For you, it is nothing because it is not something palatable. Nevertheless, for us, it is something. You must realize that nothing means nothing and nothing does not exist. Number 24. Is spirit synonymous with intelligence? Intelligence is one of the essential attributes of spirit, but both merge into a common principle. Thus, for you, they are one and the same thing. Number 25. Is spirit independent of matter, or is it only a property of matter, as colors are properties of light and as sound is a property of air? They are distinct from each other, but the union of spirit and matter is necessary to enable matter to act intelligently. Is this union equally necessary for the manifestations of spirit? For you, it is necessary, because you are not built to perceive spirit apart from matter. Your senses are not formed to do so. So in this section, we understand spirit to mean the intelligent principle rather than the entities designated by that name. Number 26. Can we conceive of spirit apart from matter and matter apart from spirit? Absolutely. Through thought. Number 27. So, are there two general elements in the universe? Matter and spirit? Yes. And over everything is God, the creator and the author of all. These three elements comprise the principle of all that exists. They are the universal Trinity. However, to the element of matter must be added the universal fluid. We'll get into this a little bit later, but fluid is an extremely important part of Spiritism and Espiritismo, and hopefully this will explain why in a few, which plays an intermediary role between spirit and matter per se. Since matter is too dense for spirit to act upon it directly, although from a certain point of view, This fluid may be regarded as part of the material element. It differs from it due to special properties. If it were simply matter, there would be no reason for spirit not to be matter too. It is placed between spirit and matter. It is a fluid just as matter is matter. In its countless combinations with matter and under the direction of spirit, it is capable of producing an infinite variety of things about which you still know very, very little. By being the agent upon which spirit acts, this universal, primitive, or elementary fluid is the principle without which matter would forever remain in a state of dispersion. It would never acquire the properties given to it by gravitation. So, might this fluid be what we call electricity? We have stated that it is capable of countless combinations. What you call the electric and magnetic fluids are both modifications of the one universal fluid. Properly speaking, this fluid is a more perfect and subtle matter that may be considered as independent. Number 28. Since spirit is something in and of itself, wouldn't it be clearer and less subject to confusion to label these two general elements as inner matter and intelligent matter? Words do not matter much to us. It is up to you to formulate your language in a way that you can understand one another. The disputes among you always arise because you cannot agree on the meanings of words that you use. Your language is incomplete regarding things that do not touch your senses. Mind you, when Allan Kardec is writing these books, he's doing so from the perspective of a medium. So he's actually interviewing a medium at this time. So like I said, he's approaching the medium from the perspective of a scientific mind, someone who's a doubter, someone who is approaching it through science and through an atheistic kind of lens. And then the medium is channeling spirits who are actually answering these questions, and then Allan Kardec is writing all this stuff down, and that's how you get this book. So just that you know, when as I'm reading it, it sounds like the answer is kind of talking down to the question, and it's because it kind of is. The spirit is kind of talking down to the interviewer in a way because the spirit is not human, so it's trying to explain it to the best of its ability. One obvious fact dominates all theories. We see matter which is not intelligent, and we see an intelligent principle that is independent of matter. Nonetheless, the origin of and connection between these two are unknown to us. Whether they have a common origin and a necessary points of contact between them, and whether intelligence has its own independent existence or it's only a property or effect, as some claim, or even whether it's an emanation of divinity, this is all unknown to us. Matter and intelligence are distinct as far as we are concerned. Thus, we regard them as being two principles comprising the universe. Above these, however, we see an intelligence dominating and governing all others, and it differs from them due to its essential attributes. It is the supreme intelligence that we call God. We're still in chapter 2, and now we are on to the properties of matter. In ponderability, an essential attribute is ponderability an essential attribute of matter? Of matter as you understand it, yes, but not of matter considered as the universal fluid. The ethereal and subtle matter that forms this fluid is imponderable to you, and yet it is the very principle of your ponderable matter. Such tongue twisting words, right? Ponderability is a relative property. Outside the gravitational pull of the globes, there is no weight, just as there is no up or down. Number 30. Does matter consist of one or many elements? One single primitive element. The bodies that you regard as simple are not true elements, but rather transformations of the one primitive matter. Number 31. Where do the different properties of matter come from? My hair's from the modifications that the elementary molecules undergo as a result of their combining under certain conditions. Number 32. Then, wouldn't flavors, odors, colors, sounds, even the poisonous or healing qualities of certain bodies be no more than modifications of the one and the same primitive substance? Yes, of course. And they only exist due to the disposition of the organs that are meant to perceive them. This principle is proven by the fact that not all people perceive the qualities of objects in the same way. What one person finds tasty, another might find disgusting. What appears blue to one person may appear red to another. Something that is poisonous for some might be harmless or even healthy to others. Number 33. Is the same elementary matter capable of undergoing all possible modifications and acquiring all possible properties? Yes. And this is what you should understand when they say that everything is in everything. Oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, and all the other elements that we consider to be simple are only modifications of one primitive substance. As it is yet impossible for us to go back to this substance except by thinking about it. The elements truly are elements to us, and without further ado, we can consider them as such until further notice. Doesn't this theory affirm the opinion of those who do not believe in more than only two essential properties for matter, force and movement? And who believes that all the other properties are only secondary effects that vary according to the intensity of the force and direction of the movement? This opinion is correct. But it should also add, according to the arrangements of the molecules, this may be seen, for example, in an opaque body that can become transparent and vice versa. Number 34. Do molecules have a defined form? Certainly. Molecules have a form, but you are incapable of discerning it. Is this form constant or variable? Constant for the primitive elementary molecules, but variable for the secondary ones, which are only aggregations of the former. However, what you term a molecule is still very far from being the elementary molecule. Oh my God. So this book was written way before quantum mechanics and quantum physics. And quantum physics has already talked a lot about how molecules are definitely, atoms are definitely not the smallest form of matter. And here we are looking at a book that was written in the early, like, I don't even know, 1800s, 1900? Beautiful. Okay, we're at the end of chapter 2, and we are discussing universal space. Number 35. Is universal space infinite or limited? Infinite. If it had limits, what would be beyond them? I know this baffles your reason, yet reason itself tells you that it cannot be any other way. The same is true of the idea of the infinite in all things. It is not something that you can comprehend in your restricted world. Suppose we were to imagine a limit to space. No matter how far out our thought may place this limit, reason tells us that there must still be something beyond it, and so on and so forth to infinity. Even if there were only an absolute void beyond that limit, it would still be space. Number 36. Is there an absolute void in any part of the universal space? No, there is no void. What appears to you to be a void is actually occupied by matter. That cannot be detected by your senses or instruments. Woo! Once again, a book that was written way before, way before we observed black space and black holes, and way before scientists have concluded that black holes are not void of space, but actually have matter within them and occupy some kind of space. This is a very, and mind you, again, these answers are being channeled by a medium from a spirit. So these answers are spirits talking to Allan Kardec when he asks these questions. All right, we are on our last chapter, you guys, and these chapters are very, very short, which is lovely. So we're on chapter 3, and we are pretty much done. And once we're done with chapter 3, if you want me to go back and do the introduction, I will be more than happy to do that. The introduction is quite lengthy. It's pretty much about the same amount of reading that we've done. Well, like once I finish chapter 3, it'll be pretty much that same amount of reading. So that's up to you. I don't mind doing it, but just letting you know. All right, so in chapter 3, the chapter is called Creation, and we'll be covering the formation of worlds, the formation of living beings, the peopling of the earth, Adam, the diversity of human races, the plurality of worlds, biblical considerations and concordances concerning the creation. Okay? Mm, that's pretty dense, so I'm going to take a drink, and we'll get started. How are you guys enjoying this so far? How are you guys enjoying this so far? Make sure you're taking your notes, okay? And if you want to further dialogue on this, if you want to, ask questions, if you want to contemplate some of the things that we've been reading, if you want to explore certain concepts further, by all means, put them in my DM, put them in the chat for Facebook, and in the Facebook group, put them inside the actual thread, and we can continue going with these concepts for sure. Here we go. The formation of worlds. The universe is comprised of the infinite number of worlds we can see and those we cannot see, all inanimate and animate beings, all the heavenly bodies moving through space, and all the fluids that fill space. Number 37. Was the universe created or has it existed from all eternity, like God? Obviously, the universe did not create itself. And if it has existed from all eternity like God, then it could not be God's work. Reason tells us that the universe could not have created itself, and since it could not possibly be the work of chance either, it must be the work of God. Number 38. How did God create the universe? To borrow a well-known expression, by the divine will. Nothing can better portray that all-powerful will than those grand words from Genesis. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Number 39. Can we know about the way in which worlds are formed? All that we can say, and the only thing you can comprehend, is that the worlds are formed by the condensation of the matter scattered throughout space. Number 40. In accordance with current beliefs, are comets a commencement of the condensation of matter and worlds in course of formation? That is correct. But it is absurd to believe in their influence. I mean, the influence commonly attributed to them, for all the celestial bodies play their part in influencing certain physical phenomena. Number 41. Could a completely formed world disappear and its compositional matter be once again scattered into space? Yes. God renews worlds just as God renews living beings. Number 42. Can we know how long it has taken for worlds to form? The Earth, for instance? I cannot tell you anything about that, for only the Creator knows. Anyone who claimed to have such knowledge or to know the number of centuries it took for its formation would be very foolish indeed. The formation of living beings is the next subject that we're on. Number 43. What did living beings first When did living beings first appear on the earth? In the beginning, all was chaos. The elements were all jumbled together, and little by little, each thing settled into its proper place. Then, living beings appropriate for the state of the globe appeared. Number 44. Where did these living beings come from in order to appear on the earth? The earth already contained their prototypes, which had been waiting for the favorable moment in order to develop. The organic elements began to combine the moment the force that kept them apart ceased, thereby forming the prototypes of all living beings. These prototypes then remained latent and inert, like a chrysalis or a seed, until the proper time for each species to appear. Then, the beings of each species came together and reproduced. Number 45. Where were these organic elements before the earth formed? Before Earth's formation? Sorry. They were in a fluidic state, so to speak, in a space amongst the spirits or on other planets, waiting for the creation of the earth in order to commence a new existence on a new globe. Chemistry shows us that when the proper conditions are present, the molecules of inorganic bodies unite to form crystals of a consistent regularity according to each type. However, the slightest shift in such conditions is enough to prevent the combining of the elements, or at least the orderly arrangement that comprises the crystal. Why would the same not apply to organic elements? We can store the seeds of plants and animals for many years, but they do not develop unless given the appropriate temperature and environment. We have seen grains of wheat germinate after several centuries. Thus, there is a latent life principle in these seeds that merely awaits for favorable circumstances in order to develop. Could this everyday occurrence not have existed since the globe's origin? Is God's glory diminished by the fact that living beings were formed out of chaos by the forces of nature? Far from it. Instead, this fact corresponds better to the idea that God wields divine power over all the infinite world by using eternal laws. Granted, this theory does not solve the problem of how the life elements themselves originated, but God guards the divine secrets and has put limits on our inquiries. Number 46. Are there still creatures that come into being spontaneously? Yes, but their primitive prototype has always existed in the latent state. You witness this phenomenon all the time. Don't human and animal tissues contain a multitude of larval prototypes waiting to emerge as soon as the decay needed for their existence begins? It is a microscopic world that slumbers and then awakens. Number 47. Was the human species among the organic elements on the terrestrial globe? Was the human species among the organic elements on the terrestrial globe? That's the question. Yes, it came forth at just the right time. This is the basis for the statement that humans were formed from the dust of the earth. Number 48. Can we know the ages in which humans and other life forms first appeared on the earth? No. All of your calculations are purely speculative. Number 49. If the prototype of the human species was among the globe's organic elements, why don't human beings continue to appear spontaneously and as they did when they first came into being? The beginning of things remains one of God's secrets. Nevertheless, we can say that once early humans began to spread out all over the earth, they absorbed into themselves the elements needed for their formation in order to pass on those elements according to the laws of reproduction. The same happened with all their species of living beings. Okay, now we're on the subject of the peopling of Earth, Adam. Number 50. Did the human species begin with one single human? No. The man known as Adam was neither the first nor the only one to populate the earth. Number 51. Can we know when Adam lived? More or less at the time assigned to him, about 4,000 years BC. The man whom tradition regards by the name Adam was one of those who somewhere survived one of the great cataclysms that had modified the Earth's surfaces in different eras. He became the progenitor of one of today's current races. The laws of nature contradict the opinion that the amount of human progress accomplished well before the time of Christ took only a few centuries, which would have to have been the case if humankind had only come in existence after the date assigned to Adam. Some regard Adam, and with good reason, as a myth or an allegory, personifying one of the world's earliest ages. Okay, now we're on the subject of the diversity of the human race. Number 52. Where did the physical and moral differences that distinguish Earth's various races come from? From climate, lifestyle, and custom. The same would happen if two siblings from the same mother were each raised differently and far apart. They would show no moral resemblance to each other. Number 53. Did humankind first appear at various points on the globe? Yes, but at different periods, which is another cause of human race diversity. Later, humankind spread throughout the different climatic zones, and new types arose in a course of interbreeding between different races. Do these different races imply distinct species? Certainly not. All are from the same family. Do the different varieties of the same fruit mean that they do not all belong to the same species? Number 54. Since the various human types have not all come from the same ancestor, mightn't they cease to regard one another as brothers and sisters? All are brothers and sisters in God because inanimate, they are animated by the same spirit and strive towards the same goal. You always want to take the words literally. Okay, now we are on the plurality of worlds. We're breezing through this chapter quite quickly. We're almost done. Number 55. Are all the globes spinning through space inhabited? Yes. And contrary to what Earth dwellers believe, they themselves are far from being the first intelligence, goodness, and perfection. Nevertheless, there are individuals who think they know the whole truth of the matter and imagine that this little planet is the only one privileged enough to be inhabited by reasoning beings. Pride and vanity. They fancy that God has created the universe only for earth dwellers. God has populated all worlds with living beings, all working toward the final objective of providence. To believe that living beings are limited only to their own particular spot in the universe is to doubt the wisdom of God. However, God has never made anything without a purpose and must have intended these worlds to fulfill a more important role than simply entertaining our eyes. Moreover, there is nothing in Earth's position, size, or physical composition that could reasonably support the notion that, to the exclusion of many thousands of similar worlds, it alone is privileged with being inhabited. Number 56. Is the physical composition of all the different globes the same? No. They do not resemble one another at all. Number 57. Since the physical composition of all the various worlds is not the same, do the beings inhabiting them have different physical organization? Of course. Just as one of your fish are made for living in the water and birds for living in the air. Number 58. Do the worlds farthest from the sun lack light, heat, since the sun would appear only as distant since the sun would only appear as a distant star to them? Do you believe that the sun is the only source of light and heat? What about electricity? On some worlds, electricity plays a role unknown to you, which is much more important than the role it plays on Earth. Besides, we have never said that all beings are made of the same matter as you, with origins similar to yours. The existence of beings on the various worlds depends on the appropriate environmental conditions in which they are intended to live. If we have never seen a fish, we would not understand how certain beings could live in water. The same applies to other worlds, which no doubt contain elements unknown to us. On the earth itself, we do not see the long polar nights being illuminated by the electricity of the aurora borealis. On other worlds, it is not possible that electricity is more abundant than on ours and performs a general role with, with effects we cannot comprehend. Hence, it could well be that those worlds self-contain the light and heat sources required by their inhabitants. We are now on to the next subject, which is biblical considerations and concordances concerning the creation. Number 59. Cultures have had, cultures, I apologize, cultures have held widely differing ideas about creation according to their degree of understanding. With the support of science, reason has recognized the improbability of some of these theories. However, the one given by the spirits confirms the opinions long acknowledged by more enlightened individuals. The objection to such a theory is that it seems to contradict the sacred texts, but a serious examination will lead to the realization that this contradiction is more apparent than real, and that it results from the way an allegorical meaning is interpreted. The issue of the first man personified in Adam as being the exclusive progenitor of humankind is not the only religious belief that has had to be modified. At one time, the movement of the earth around the sun appeared so contrary to the scriptures that all kinds of persecutions were carried out under such a pretext. Nevertheless, the earth continued to move despite, I don't know how to say this word, I'm sorry, and no one today would dispute it without insulting reason itself. The Bible also tells us that the world was created in 6 days, and it establishes the time of its creation at about 4,000 years before the Christian era. Before then, the earth did not exist at all. It was created out of nothing. It is a solemn text, yet physical science, inexorable science, has proven the contrary. Earth's formation is indelibly written in the fossil record. And it has been proven that the 6 days of creation represent successive periods, each lasting perhaps many hundreds of thousands of years. This is not a theory, a doctrine, or an isolated opinion. It is a fact as solid as is the movement of the earth around the sun, a fact that theology can no longer refuse to accept, and it demonstrates the error that one can fall into by attributing literal truths to often figurative language. Should we thus conclude that the Bible is in error? No. Rather, people err in the way they interpret it. In excavating Earth's archives, science has discovered the order in which different living beings have appeared on its surface, and this order is in agreement with the one indicated in Genesis. The difference, however, is that instead of having issued miraculously from the hand of God in only a few hours, the work of creation did indeed occur according to God's will, but through the laws of natural forces over millions of years. But does that make God any less great and powerful? Is the sublimity of God lost because it did not appear instantaneously? Of course not. We would have to be petty. It would have to be a petty idea about the divinity not to recognize the divine omnipotence in the eternal laws established to govern the world. Far from diminishing the divine work, science shows it is us under a more magnificent aspect that better conforms to our notions of God's power and majesty, precisely because the work was done without disregard for the laws of nature. Science places humankind last in the order of creation of living beings and is in tandem with the Mosaic record on this point. However, that record puts the universal flood at about 1,654 years after the Earth's creation, whereas geology shows us that the Great Cataclysm occurred before humankind even appeared. So far, no traces have been found in the primitive layers that would attest to the presence of humans or animals, which, from a physical standpoint at least, would be of the same category. However, nothing has actually proven this to be impossible. Since many discoveries have already raised questions about this issue, it is possible that at any moment the material certainty of the antiquity of human race may come to light. In that case, as well as in others, the biblical text would be shown to portray an allegory. The actual issue lies in determining whether or not the geological cataclysm was the same as the one of Noah's story. We know that the time needed to form the fossil layers does not allow any confusion. Therefore, as soon as any vestiges of human existence prior to that great catastrophe are found, it will be proven either that Adam was not the first man or that his creation has been lost in the night of time. There is no arguing against this fact, and it would have to be accepted in the same way as the movement of the earth and the 6 periods of creation. The existence of the human race prior to the geological flood is no doubt still hypothetical. But consider the following. Affirming that humans first appeared upon the earth 4,000 years BC, and if all of them, except for a single family, were wiped out 1,650 years later, then the entire current population of the earth must have originated from the time of Noah, i.e., 2,350 years BC. However, when the Hebrews migrated to Egypt, sorry guys, when the Hebrews migrated to Egypt in the 18th century BC, they found a densely populated and highly civilized land. History also shows that at the same time, India and many other lands were flourishing as well. And this fact does not take into account the chronological tables of certain cultures that go back even further. Thus, it would have been necessary for the descendants of a single individual's family to have populated from the 24th to the 18th century, i.e., 600 years ago. All the vast regions that have been known about that time, supposing that others have not been populated. It would also have been necessary for the human race during this brief period to have evolved from its primitive state of total ignorance to the highest degree of intellectual development. Both suppositions are in contradiction to the anthropological laws. Human race diversity supports this contradiction. Climate and customs undoubtedly produce modifications in physical characteristics. But these modifications can only be carried so far, and physiological examinations prove the existence among some races of constitutional differences more profound than could be produced by climate alone. The crossing of races produce intermediary types and tends to erase extreme characteristics. It does not produce these characteristics, however, it only creates varieties. Thus, for the crossing of races to have occurred, it would be necessary for there to have been distinct races in the first place. But how could there have been distinct races if they all came from one ancestor, and especially if such a short time? How could anyone believe that in only a few centuries, a few descendants of Noah had been transformed to the point of producing the Ethiopian race, for example? Such a metamorphosis would be as unlikely as the theory of a common origin for wolves and sheep, amphibians and elephants, or birds and fish. Once more, nothing can prevail against the factual evidence. On the other hand, everything can be explained if we admit that humans existed prior to the time commonly assigned to their appearance, that their origins were diverse, and that Adam, who lived 6,000 years ago, populated an uninhabited region, and that Noah's flood was a localized catastrophe rather than the great geological cataclysm. And finally, that we take into account the allegorical form characteristic of the Oriental style, which can be found in the sacred books of every culture. That is why it is prudent not to lightly accuse as erroneous those doctrines which, like so many others, could someday enjoy a retraction from individuals who currently oppose them. Rather than being lost, religious ideas become even greater when they march in step with science. This is the only way to keep from being vulnerable to skepticism. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 3. So we have gone through chapters 1 through 3, and I definitely want to keep going with you guys. We do have a few comments here if you guys don't mind me kind of going back and reading some of them. Someone did ask if I was doing pulls, free readings today. Not right now. It says here that this is interesting and informative. Is today just a spiritual teaching, or are we getting to readings as well? No, we are not going to be doing readings today. Allan Kardec was a spoof who robbed rich English people putting on shows to get money. Oh, if only you knew, honey. That's so cute. No, that's not the case. So let's see what we got here on Facebook and YouTube. Let's see. Oh, great. So a lot of people have learned a lot about this already. Awesome. Awesome. So you guys, I would love for you to comment to me which day of the week you would like to continue moving forward with this. So I will go another 3 chapters. So let me know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, for example. But I can only really do it around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So just let me know which night works best for you, and we can continue with that. Okay. I do not have a website currently. I just took it down. All of my business stuff goes through my Facebook page, The Magical Solution. Okay. Now, like I mentioned before, if you guys have questions, if you want to continue sort of contemplating and digesting and theorizing about what we just read, leave comments so that we can continue with the discussion. He could have not predicted the principles of physics if he was a spoof. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it wasn't even him predicting this stuff. This was a medium that he was interviewing, and she was channeling spirit. And this was it was actually a female. I forget her name. Her name is in here somewhere. The name of the medium. She was a very young woman in her like early 20s. But anywho, yeah, so I mean, it's this book is amazing, and like I said, this is the predecessor. So this is the first book in the series, and then the second book is the Medium's book. Now, again, this breaks down the metaphysics around spirit. It breaks down, what spirit is made out of. Now, if you notice, there was section 2 talked a lot about the fluids of matter. The fluid is something that's going to be really important moving forward. So keep that in the back of your mind. Make a note of that in your notebook, that we're going to really kind of hone in on this idea of fluid. He also talked about the two elements of matter and of divine intelligence, right? He talked about like this idea of intelligence and matter, and then he talked about the fluid sort of being the thing that connects the two, right? That's another thing that you kind of want to make a note about and think about for the next time that we meet, because we're going to get into more depth. She was quoting string theory back in the exactly. I mean, this is, I'm telling you, entire religions, entire I mean, so much has grown from this movement. You know what I mean? Now, the Spiritist movement, yes, it had in the Victorian time, yes, it did have its spooks. Let's be real. You had people doing table tippings and people, you know, uh, doing the thing where they shake, everything is shaking and the lights flicker on and off and shit. And like you see that, and it's fantastical and theatrical and stuff. But that's not what this is. This was a man who was a scientist and a teacher at heart, and who stumbled upon a phenomenon that he was so wanting to look at from a scientific lens. He did not believe. He was not a believer. As a matter of fact, this first book came from his perspective of not being a believer at first. And he was like, I need to figure this out. And he was ridiculed and he was thrown out of scientific communities. And he was like, I don't care. There's something here. There's something to this that I need to figure out. And he was noticing certain people who had these gifts of mediumship, and he was like, there's something going on. There's something deeper than just these charlatans out here making tables levitate and lights flickering on and off and whatnot. And so that's where these books come in, and it's really sort of his scientific method and his scientific exploration of spirit and matter, and how to interact and how to work with them. I mean, it's absolutely a phenomenal experience to go through these books. So I'm truly honored to actually read these for you guys and to, um, have a discussion with you guys. Yes, so my Facebook name is the Facebook name of my page is The Magical Solution. That's magical with a CK. And the name of the book is called The Spirits Book by Allan Kardec. Okay. And I will leave a link and all his information. Cheap books, you can find them right on Amazon. They've been around for freaking ever. You can find them very, very easily. This book is actually a new one for me. My old series is all broken apart, fallen apart. And this book I actually like more because it actually adds a lot of notation in here. The introduction is very long and goes into depth about just a lot. Like there's more meat in this than the original text. So I highly recommend this particular version. It was, I don't even know who publishes this shit. Um International Spiritist Council. The International Spiritist Council. So it was actually written by a Spiritist council. Okay. It was the 4th edition. Yep. Very cool. So these are considered doctrines, the doctrines of Spiritism. These are considered the foundation of Spiritism philosophy. So, this is not light reading, obviously. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. I am not doing readings tonight, you guys. Thank you for asking. We will do it another night. For now, I just want to focus on educating. I love doing readings, don't get me wrong, but there's a time and a place, right? And I don't know, just not in the mood tonight. I was thinking about doing it after the reading, but I'm just not in the mood tonight. So, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for joining me. Okay. You know what? I'm going to say let's aim for Wednesday. Let's aim for Wednesday. What day is Wednesday? Wednesday is the 13th. Okay? So Wednesday the 13th, 7 p.m., we are going to move into the next 3 chapters, chapters 4 to 7. Okay? And have your notebook ready, have your questions ready. Let's explore this further. Let's do this. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Please share, please let people know what I'm doing. Um, just because you come in later on in the book does not mean that you are going to be lost. He tackles very specific topics and concepts, and he tends to repeat himself a lot. So don't feel like you're going to be lost if you come in late. Okay. Wednesday is also the new moon, correct, Marius? It is the new moon. It's a perfect time to do it. So once again, guys, thank you so much. Have a beautiful night. Much love.